wonderful of an occasion that circumstance has allowed us to be here in this time and in this place to celebrate really this wonderful feast day that we've celebrated each year since the founding of the Holy Spirit came over 2,000 years ago, almost 2,000 years ago. And each year that, especially even as being a priest, praying for that fresh outpouring of the Holy Spirit, and to pray for particular gifts, each year I find myself different in a different circumstances and different kind of stage of life or different things going on. And I look at those gifts of the Holy Spirit, and each year I find myself attracted to maybe one or two, and they're usually different with everything that's going on. And certainly our world is a lot different than last year, a lot different than just a few months ago. And all of us maybe have new challenges. And here we are gathered here together. We're asking for that fresh outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And traditionally, our tradition has handed on 7 particular gifts of the Holy Spirit. And those 7 gifts, when you really dive into them, a lot of them kind of sound a lot the same. They kind of cross over each other in certain ways. But we've really kind of parsed out 7 particular gifts of the Holy Spirit. And we'll expound a little bit on those today. And I ask you to find out which one, or maybe which of the few you want to ask for in a particular way, for a fresh outpouring of those gifts in your lives, to open ourselves up to receiving them and then to cooperate with them. There's that gift of the Holy Spirit called understanding. I always like to think of this gift as kind of that macro view, or maybe not so much the macro view, the overall view, but it's that intuition to see what's underneath things, the interconnectivity, how things are integrated, and the relationality between all these things in our world, both in the physical world and in the spiritual world and in the natural world and in the supernatural. That gift of understanding helps us see how everything is connected in their relationships. That's a particular gift. Another gift of the Holy Spirit would be knowledge. Sounds a lot like understanding, but I like to think of knowledge as a real honed-in particular view. It's kind of like that micro view where you hone in on something and you get to know something so deep in all its particular qualities and components. It's kind of like that almost scientific, that almost knowing of something. That's a gift of the Holy Spirit. There's another gift of the Holy Spirit that we sometimes call right judgment. Sometimes we call it counsel. And this is the gift that is when decisions need to be made. This is a gift that allows us to see things in their proper order. It allows us to see their order of importance, or their order of participating in what is true, good, and beautiful. And so that scale of what's our highest good, what is it that we were really called for, or things that we're really meant for, and aspire to that highest good. So that gift of counsel and right judgment allows us to put things on that scale, and then allows us to make those decisions properly and right standing. So there's 3 gifts of the Holy Spirit. The next gift of the Holy Spirit, I like to say, is the pinnacle. It's the top of the pyramid. It's kind of all-encompassing. I think within it you can see all the other gifts, but it's the gift of wisdom. And that gift of wisdom is to be able to see the world the way that God sees the world, to see it through God's eyes, with God's mind, God's heart, and to see how everything plays together. So to be wise is to really pull yourself out of yourself and really put yourself in the mind and heart in God, and see and interact with the world in that way. It's the pinnacle of all the spiritual gifts, the gift of wisdom. There's another gift of the Holy Spirit that I really feel is lacking in our world today, and I think people maybe don't even cherish this gift or see its importance, but it's that gift of piety, that gift of reverence. that gift of being able to see things that are holy or sacred, or seeing the meaning sometimes behind them, and then causing actions from within us to be able to respect that meaning or that sacredness that's within them. Particularly in our world, it has to deal with language. You know, there are certain words that really have very profound meaning in what they try to name or describe, and we usually are so quick to throw them around in semantics or even use them in vulgarity in ways that we shouldn't. And so that gift of reverence and piety can really help us abstract meaning and see things the way they really are in our world, something that's really quite missing. Another gift of the Holy Spirit, for some of us, we may have grown up and it was called fear of the Lord, and then for a while it was changed to awe and wonder, and now we're back to fear of the Lord and in our prayers. But that is a gift where we have such a reverence, such an awe and wonder for who God is and all of God's qualities, his characteristics, his virtues, and especially those that he's called us to live in, those moral maxims to be just like him. And then it's to have that reverential fear of doing anything that would rupture our relationship with God. So a fear, a healthy fear, that we wouldn't want to do anything that would allow God's presence to withdraw from us or to rupture that relationship, and especially that loving relationship and that lavish giving of those graces that God wishes to give us, but we close ourselves off because we have done something that has caused God's presence to withdraw from us. So that's a great gift of the Holy Spirit. And the last gift of the Holy Spirit to close out the 7 would be the gift of fortitude, that gift of that strength, of remaining firm in temptation, remaining firm in hope, moving forward in hope, looking on our walk of journey in faith that we have behind us, and moving forward in hope. It's that strength or that courage in trials, or knowing that we're doing the right thing or aspiring to the right thing, and really seeking God with all we've got, sometimes even in the midst of fear, or even in the midst of unknowing, or even that temptation to despair. Paul, he describes this day as the calling of the Spirit that makes us Christ's body, the church. And so each of us, if we're in the body, we have a particular role. Each of us is a cell within that entire body. And each cell, there's different types of cells, even in our own body. We have our own jobs, our own, the cells that are used in senses, and our organ senses are different than the ones in some of our other organs, are different than the ones that are out there on the surface, on our skin, and keeping us safe. There's so many different jobs. Each of us has that job, and those jobs sometimes may be changing. And so this Feast of Pentecost allows us to maybe seek and ask that question again. What's my job? What's my role? Now, we do know in the body there are good cells, and they know what they're supposed to do, and they do what they're supposed to do. We also know that in the body sometimes there's cells that don't do what they're supposed to do. We usually call those cells cancerous. There's different types of cancerous cells. There's those ones that we usually say are benign. They're there, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, but they're not doing any harm. So we usually call them benign. And then there's another type of cancerous cell that we usually call, it's malignant. It's usually bad. It's one that's working against the body. And even so, it can cause great harm or even bring down the destruction of the body. So we want to make sure that we're not malignant, that we're not benign, but we want to make sure that we're doing the right job that God has created us for, that God is giving us all those gifts that we need and to live in the Holy Spirit, to live our place in the body, to help be Christ's hands and feet in the world today, and in the world and in his presence that our world so desperately needs. So let us open ourselves to those graces today and ask, what are those graces we need, those gifts that we need of the Holy Spirit, and what's our role, what's our purpose that God has for us on our Christian journey of life for us now? And let us stand as we profess our faith. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only